Marcus Johnson was having one of those ordinary Tuesday afternoons that felt like every other day in his 32 years of life. He had just finished his shift at the auto repair shop where he worked as a senior mechanic, his hands still carrying the familiar smell of motor oil and metal, despite scrubbing them twice. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as he walked toward his pickup truck, thinking about nothing more exciting than stopping by the grocery store and heading home to his quiet apartment. That's when he heard it, the desperate sound of an engine refusing to start, followed by what could only be described as a frustrated sob. Marcus paused, his hand on his truck door, and looked around. There, about 50 feet away in the corner of the parking lot, sat a beat-up Honda Civic with its hood up. Steam was rising from the engine, and he could see someone hunched over the steering wheel inside. Marcus had always been the kind of person who couldn't walk past someone in trouble. His grandmother had raised him that way after his parents died in a car accident when he was just 8 years old. "You help folks when they need it," she used to say, "because you never know when you might be the one needing help." Those words had stuck with him through foster care, through high school, through learning his trade, and through all the years of working hard to build a simple, honest life. He approached the car slowly, not wanting to startle whoever was inside. As he got closer, he could see it was a young woman, probably in her late 20s, with shoulder-length brown hair that looked like she'd been running her hands through it. She was crying. Not the dramatic kind of crying you see in movies, but the quiet, defeated kind that comes when you've reached the end of your rope and don't know what to do next. "Excuse me, ma'am," Marcus said gently, keeping his distance. "I'm a mechanic. Looks like you might be having some car trouble. Mind if I take a look?" The woman looked up, and Marcus could see her eyes were red and puffy. She looked terrified for just a moment. A single woman alone with a broken-down car, approached by a stranger. But something in Marcus's gentle voice and respectful distance must have reassured her, because she nodded. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't mean to be a mess. It's just, this car is all I have, and I don't know anything about engines, and I can't afford a tow truck, and my son is at daycare, and they charge extra if you're late, and I just—" She trailed off, looking embarrassed by her outburst. "No need to apologize," Marcus said. "We've all been there. I'm Marcus, by the way. Mind if I take a look under the hood?" "I'm Sarah," she said. "Sarah Martinez. And please, if you think you can help, I'd be so grateful." Marcus walked around to the front of the car and immediately saw the problem. The radiator had a crack in it, and coolant was leaking everywhere. It wasn't a simple fix, but it wasn't the end of the world either. He looked back at Sarah, who was watching him hopefully. "Well, the good news is it's fixable," he said. "The bad news is it's not something we can do here in this parking lot. Your radiator has a crack, and you're going to need a replacement." Sarah's face fell. "How much does something like that cost?" Marcus thought for a moment. A new radiator, plus labor, would probably run her around $400 or $500 at most shops. Looking at her car, her clothes, and the worry in her eyes, he was pretty sure she didn't have that kind of money lying around. "Listen," he said, "where do you need to get to right now? You mentioned your son at daycare?" "Little Steps Learning Center on Maple Street," Sarah said, "but that's like 20 minutes away, and they close at 6, and if I'm late again—" She looked at her phone. "It's already 5:30. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Come on, I'll drive you to get your son, and then we can figure out what to do about your car." Sarah stared at him. "You would do that? But you don't even know me." "You need help," Marcus said simply. "I can help. That's all there is to it." The drive to the daycare was quiet at first. Sarah sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's pickup, clutching her purse and occasionally giving him directions. She seemed nervous, which Marcus understood. He was a stranger, after all, and she was trusting him with not just her safety, but with getting to her son. "So what do you do for work?" Marcus asked, trying to put her at ease. "I'm a server at Mel's Diner," Sarah said. "The one over on 5th Street. It's not much, but it pays the bills, mostly." Marcus knew the place. It was one of those small, family-owned restaurants that had been around forever, the kind of place where the coffee was always hot and the pie was homemade, but where the servers probably made barely enough to scrape by. "How old is your son?" he asked. Sarah's whole face lit up when she talked about her son. "Tommy's 4. He's everything to me. After his dad left when he was 2, it's just been me and him against the world, you know? I try to give him everything I can, but sometimes—" She gestured helplessly. "Sometimes life throws you a curveball," Marcus finished. "Exactly." Sarah looked at him curiously. "Do you have kids?" "No," Marcus said. "Never found the right person, I guess. But I was raised by my grandmother after my parents died, so I know what it's like when it's just one person trying to do everything." They pulled into the daycare parking lot with 10 minutes to spare. Sarah let out a huge sigh of relief. "Thank you so much. I can't tell you what this means to me." "Happy to help," Marcus said. "Why don't I wait here while you get Tommy?" Sarah nodded and hurried inside. Marcus sat in his truck, thinking about his own childhood. His grandmother had been amazing, but he remembered the stress in her face sometimes. The way she would count and recount the money in her purse at the grocery store, the times she would eat less so he could have seconds. Being a single parent was hard enough without your car breaking down. A few minutes later, Sarah came back out holding the hand of a small boy with dark hair and big brown eyes. The kid was chattering away about something that had happened at school, his free hand waving around as he told his story. When they got to the truck, the boy stopped talking and looked up at Marcus with the kind of curiosity that only 4-year-olds can manage. "Tommy, this is Mr. Marcus," Sarah said. "He helped Mommy when our car broke down." "Hi, Mr. Marcus," Tommy said solemnly. "Are you a superhero?" Marcus laughed. "No, buddy, I'm just a guy who fixes cars." "That's almost the same thing," Tommy said seriously. "Cars are important." "They sure are," Marcus agreed, helping Sarah get Tommy into his car seat in the back of the pickup. As they drove away from the daycare, Tommy kept up a constant stream of chatter about his day, his friends, his teacher, and a butterfly he had seen at recess. Sarah would occasionally answer him or ask questions, but Marcus could tell she was still worried about the car situation. "So where to now?" Marcus asked. "Our apartment, I guess," Sarah said. "It's not far, but I don't know what I'm going to do about getting to work tomorrow. I can't afford to miss any shifts." Marcus had been thinking about this during the drive. "What time do you start work?" 7 a.m., Sarah said. "And what time does Tommy's daycare open?" 6:30. Marcus nodded. "Here's what I'm thinking. I can come by around 6 tomorrow morning and give you both a ride. Drop Tommy at daycare and you at work. Then I can go get the parts for your car and fix it while you're working." Sarah turned to stare at him. "You would do all that?" "Why not?" Marcus said. "I've got the day off tomorrow anyway." "But the parts, I don't have the money for parts right now. I don't get paid until Friday." "We'll figure something out," Marcus said. "Maybe I can get them at cost from my shop." They pulled up in front of a small apartment complex. It wasn't fancy. The kind of place where young families lived when they were just starting out, or single parents lived when they were making it work on one income. But it looked clean and safe, and there were kids' bikes on some of the porches and flowers in some of the windows. "This is us," Sarah said. "Tommy, say thank you to Mr. Marcus." "Thank you, Mr. Marcus," Tommy said. "Will we see you tomorrow?" "Looks like it, buddy," Marcus said. Sarah got Tommy out of his car seat and then stood by Marcus's truck for a moment. "I don't know how to thank you, really. You've been so kind, and I'm not used to people just helping for no reason." "There is a reason," Marcus said. "It's the right thing to do." Sarah looked like she might cry again, but this time from gratitude rather than frustration. 6 o'clock tomorrow? I'll be here, Marcus promised. As he drove away, Marcus could see Sarah and Tommy in his rearview mirror walking up the steps to their apartment. Tommy was still holding his mom's hand, but he turned and waved at the truck until it disappeared around the corner. Marcus went home that night thinking about Sarah and Tommy. There had been something about the way Sarah had looked so grateful just for basic human kindness, and something about the way Tommy had called him almost a superhero just for offering to help. It made Marcus realize how long it had been since he'd felt really needed by anyone. He called his shop that night and talked to his boss about getting parts at cost. Then he went online and looked up the exact radiator Sarah's car would need. It would cost him about $150, plus his time, but he had both to spare. He'd been saving money for years without really having anything particular to save for. Maybe this was what he'd been saving for without knowing it. The next morning, Marcus was outside Sarah's apartment building at exactly 6 o'clock. Sarah came out with Tommy, and both of them looked surprised to see him actually there. "You came?" Sarah said, and there was something in her voice that suggested she'd been afraid he wouldn't show up. "Said I would," Marcus replied, getting out to help with Tommy's car seat again. The morning routine went smoothly. Tommy chattered the whole way to daycare about a picture he was going to draw for Mr. Marcus. Sarah was quieter, but she seemed less stressed than she had the day before. "I called my boss and asked for the day off," Sarah said as they drove toward the diner. "I know I can't afford to lose a shift, but I thought maybe I could help you with the car, or at least buy you lunch or something." "You don't need to do that," Marcus said. "I want to," Sarah said firmly. "You're going out of your way to help us. The least I can do is be there." Marcus dropped Sarah at the diner and went to his shop to get the radiator and some tools. His boss, Joe, was curious about the whole situation. "So you're fixing some stranger's car for free?" Joe asked. "Something like that," Marcus said. "You sure she's not running some kind of scam?" Marcus thought about Sarah's tears of frustration, Tommy's innocent chatter, the genuine gratitude in Sarah's voice. "I'm sure," Joe shrugged. "Your money, your time, but be careful, Marcus. Some people take advantage of nice guys like you." Marcus spent the morning removing Sarah's old radiator and installing the new one. It was hot work, and by noon he was sweaty and dirty, but the car was running smoothly. He was just finishing up when Sarah appeared with a bag from the diner. "I brought lunch," she said. "Joe at the shop told me you hadn't eaten anything all morning." They sat on the curb next to her car and ate sandwiches and shared a bag of chips. Marcus couldn't remember the last time someone had brought him lunch while he was working. "I still can't believe you're doing all this," Sarah said. "I keep telling you it's no big deal," Marcus said. "It is to me," Sarah said quietly. "Tommy's dad, when he left, he said I was on my own. Said he didn't sign up to be tied down by a kid and responsibilities. For 2 years, it really has been just me and Tommy. I'd forgotten what it was like when someone just helps." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he just kept eating his sandwich. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "Shoot. Why are you really doing this? I mean, you seem like a good guy and everything, but this is way beyond just being nice to a stranger." Marcus thought about it. "I guess. I know what it's like to not have anyone. And I know what it's like to be a kid who depends on one person for everything. My grandmother did her best, but there were times when I could see how hard it was for her. If someone had shown up to help her the way I'm helping you, I think it would have meant the world to both of us." Sarah nodded slowly. "So this is you being the person you wish had shown up for your grandmother?" "Maybe," Marcus said. "Something like that." They finished lunch in comfortable silence, and then Marcus drove Sarah back to get Tommy from daycare. The little boy was thrilled to see both of them together again, and he insisted on giving Marcus a drawing he'd made. A picture of a man in blue overalls fixing a red car while a woman and a child watched. "That's you fixing our car," Tommy announced proudly. "I can see that," Marcus said, genuinely touched. "It's a great picture, buddy. Thank you." As they drove back to the apartment complex, Tommy fell asleep in his car seat, exhausted from a full day at daycare. Sarah kept turning around to check on him, and Marcus found himself glancing in the rearview mirror, too. "He likes you," Sarah said quietly. "He's a good kid," Marcus replied. "He doesn't usually warm up to strangers this quickly. He's been cautious around men since his dad left." They pulled up in front of the apartment building. Sarah gently woke Tommy, and Marcus helped carry him upstairs. Sarah's apartment was small but neat and clean. There were children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, picture books stacked on a small coffee table, and toys organized in bins against one wall. It looked like a home where a child was loved and cared for, even if money was tight. "Would you like some coffee?" Sarah asked. "Or water? I'm sorry, I don't have much to offer." "Coffee sounds great," Marcus said. While Sarah made coffee, Tommy showed Marcus his room and his favorite toys. The boy had an impressive collection of toy cars and trucks, and he explained the important features of each one with the seriousness of a 4-year-old expert. "This one's my favorite," Tommy said, holding up a small blue pickup truck. "It looks like yours." Marcus sat on the floor next to Tommy and admired the truck. "That's a good one. Does it work?" Tommy nodded and demonstrated by making the truck drive around in circles on the carpet, complete with engine sounds. Sarah appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee. "Tommy, why don't you play in here while Mr. Marcus and I talk?" They went into the small living room, and Sarah handed Marcus a mug. The coffee was good, strong and hot. "I need to pay you for the parts," Sarah said. "I know you said we'd figure something out, but I can't just let you pay for everything." "The parts cost me $150, Marcus said. "But don't worry about it right now. Pay me when you can." "I get paid Friday," Sarah said. "I can give you at least half then." Marcus nodded. "That works." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, drinking their coffee and listening to Tommy play with his cars in the next room. "Can I tell you something?" Sarah said. "Sure." "Yesterday, when my car broke down, I sat there crying because I thought it was the final straw, you know? Like maybe this was the universe telling me I couldn't do it anymore, that I wasn't strong enough to take care of Tommy by myself." She paused. "And then you showed up. Just like that. Like maybe the universe was actually trying to help instead of hurt." Marcus didn't know what to say to that either, but he didn't think he needed to say anything. "Tommy keeps asking if you're going to come back," Sarah said. "What do you tell him?" "I tell him I don't know, but I hope you do. Come back, I mean." She looked at him seriously. "Not just because you helped us with the car, but because it's been nice. Having someone around who cares." Marcus looked around the small apartment, at the pictures on the refrigerator, at the toys organized so carefully, at this woman who was clearly doing everything she could to build a good life for her son. He thought about his own empty apartment, his quiet evenings, his weekends spent alone. "I'd like that too," he said. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus began to wonder if maybe this chance meeting in a parking lot was going to change more than just Sarah's day. Maybe it was going to change everything. 3 weeks had passed since Marcus first helped Sarah with her broken-down car, and what had started as a simple act of kindness had somehow become a routine that none of them seemed willing to break. Marcus found himself stopping by Sarah's apartment most evenings after work, sometimes bringing dinner from whatever restaurant he'd picked up takeout from, sometimes just showing up to see how their day had gone. Tommy had started running to the window every evening around 6 o'clock, pressing his face against the glass and watching for Marcus's blue pickup truck. When he spotted it turning into the parking lot, he would shriek with excitement and run to the door, usually arriving there before Marcus had even finished climbing the stairs. "Mr. Marcus! Mr. Marcus!" Tommy would shout. launching himself into Marcus's arms like they hadn't seen each other in months instead of just 24 hours. Sarah would appear behind her son, usually wiping her hands on a dish towel or pushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and she would smile that soft, grateful smile that Marcus had grown to love seeing at the end of each day. "You don't have to keep coming by," she would say, but there was never any real conviction in her voice. She had stopped protesting much after the first week, when it became clear that Marcus wasn't showing up out of obligation or pity, but because he genuinely wanted to be there. On this particular evening, Marcus knocked on the door and waited. Usually, Tommy would answer immediately, but tonight it took longer than usual. When the door finally opened, it was Sarah, and she looked exhausted. "Hey," she said, managing a smile. "Come on in. Tommy's in his room. He's having a rough day." Marcus could hear crying coming from the back of the apartment, the heartbroken sobbing of a small child who had reached his emotional limit. "What happened?" Sarah ran her hands through her hair, a gesture Marcus had learned meant she was stressed. "There was an incident at daycare today. Another kid said some things about Tommy not having a dad, and it really upset him. He's been crying on and off since I picked him up." Marcus felt his heart clench. He'd grown incredibly attached to Tommy over the past few weeks, and the thought of the little boy being hurt by other kids' words made him angry. "Can I talk to him?" Marcus asked. Sarah looked surprised. "You want to? If that's okay with you." Sarah nodded and led him to Tommy's room. The little boy was lying face down on his bed, clutching his favorite stuffed elephant and crying into his pillow. When he heard his name being called, he looked up with red, puffy eyes. "Mr. Marcus?" Tommy's voice was small and shaky. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Your mom told me you had a hard day. Want to talk about it?" Tommy sat up and immediately crawled into Marcus's lap, something that had become natural over the past few weeks. "Jason at school said I was weird because I don't have a daddy. He said all kids are supposed to have daddies, and since I don't have one, something must be wrong with me." Marcus felt Sarah tense behind him, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "Well, Jason doesn't know what he's talking about, does he? Because there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're smart, you're funny, you're kind, and you're brave. Those are the things that matter." "But why don't I have a daddy like the other kids?" Tommy asked. Marcus looked back at Sarah, who was leaning against the doorframe with tears in her eyes. She nodded, giving him permission to answer. "Sometimes adults make decisions that don't make sense," Marcus said carefully. "Your daddy made a choice to leave, but that choice was about him, not about you. It doesn't mean anything bad about you, Tommy. It just means he made a mistake." "A big mistake?" "The biggest mistake anyone could ever make," Marcus said seriously. "Because you're an amazing kid, and anyone would be lucky to be your dad." Tommy was quiet for a moment, thinking this over. Then he looked up at Marcus with those big brown eyes. "Do you think you could be my daddy?" The question hung in the air like a lightning bolt. Marcus felt his breath catch, and he could hear Sarah make a small sound behind him. Tommy was looking at him with such hope, such trust, such innocence. "Oh, buddy," Marcus said softly. That's a really big question." "But you already do daddy things," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "You fix our car, and you bring us dinner, and you read me stories, and you help me with my toys. And you make mommy smile. Daddies are supposed to do those things, right?" Marcus looked back at Sarah again. She was covering her mouth with her hand, and there were tears streaming down her face, but she was nodding slightly. "Tommy," Marcus said, "being someone's dad is a very special thing. It's not just about doing nice things. It's about promising to always be there no matter what. It's about loving someone so much that you would do anything to protect them and take care of them. Like how you take care of me and Mommy?" Marcus felt his own eyes getting damp. "Yeah, buddy. Like that." Tommy seemed satisfied with this answer and snuggled closer to Marcus. I think you would be a really good daddy. After they got Tommy calmed down and settled for the evening, Marcus and Sarah sat in her small living room, both of them still processing what had just happened. "I'm sorry about that," Sarah said. "I didn't know he was going to ask you something like that." "Don't apologize," Marcus said. "He's just a kid trying to make sense of his world." "But it puts you in an uncomfortable position," Sarah said. "You didn't sign up for a 4-year-old asking you to be his father." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What do you want? I mean, what do you want for you and Tommy? Not what you think you should want or what's practical, but what do you actually want?" Sarah looked at him with surprise. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I've been thinking a lot lately about what I want, and I realize that what I want has changed pretty dramatically in the past 3 weeks. Sarah tucked her legs under her on the couch and studied his face. "What did you want before?" "Honestly, not much. I wanted to go to work, come home, watch TV, go to bed, and do it all again the next day. I wanted to save money for someday, even though I didn't know what someday was supposed to look like. I wanted to be left alone, mostly. And now?" Marcus looked around the apartment, at the pictures on the refrigerator, at Tommy's toys neatly organized in their bins, at the book they'd been reading together sitting open on the coffee table. "Now I want to be here. I want to help Tommy with his homework when he's old enough to have homework. I want to teach him how to throw a baseball and how to change a tire and how to treat people with respect. I want to make sure you don't have to worry about your car breaking down or whether you can afford groceries or whether you're doing this whole parenting thing right." Sarah's eyes were wide. "Marcus, I want to come home to you and Tommy every day instead of to an empty apartment," he continued. "I want to be the person Tommy runs to when he's had a bad day. I want to be the person you can count on no matter what." He paused. "I want to be Tommy's dad, Sarah. And I want to be whatever you'll let me be to you." Sarah was crying again, but this time it was a different kind of crying. "You really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more in my life." Sarah moved closer to him on the couch. "I'm scared, Marcus. Tommy and we've been hurt before. His biological father made a lot of promises before he left." "I'm not him," Marcus said firmly. "I know you're not. But what if—" She struggled to find the words. "What if this is all just some kind of temporary thing for you? What if you get tired of the responsibility, or you meet someone without a kid, or you realize this isn't what you actually want?" Marcus reached over and took her hands in his. "Sarah, I get why you're scared, but I need you to understand something. I'm not here because I feel sorry for you or because I'm trying to be a good Samaritan. I'm here because you and Tommy have become my family. I've never had a family before, not really. My parents died when I was a kid, and my grandmother, bless her heart, did her best. But it was just survival mode most of the time." He squeezed her hands gently. "But with you and Tommy, I feel like I finally understand what family is supposed to feel like. It's not about obligation or duty. It's about love. It's about wanting to be the best version of yourself because someone else is counting on you. It's about having people who are happy to see you at the end of a long day." "Tommy adores you," Sarah said softly. "And I adore him. Sarah, that little boy has no idea how much he's changed my life. Before I met you guys, I was just existing. Now I'm actually living." They sat in silence for a while, just holding hands on the couch. Finally, Sarah spoke up. "There's something you should know," she said, "about Tommy's father." Marcus waited, not pushing. "His name is David. We met in college, and I thought we were going to get married and have this perfect little life together. When I got pregnant with Tommy, David seemed excited at first. He talked about teaching his son to play football and taking family vacations and all these future plans." Sarah's voice got quieter. "But after Tommy was born, David started pulling away. He said he felt trapped. He said he was too young to be tied down with a kid and responsibilities. He started staying out late, not coming home some nights, picking fights with me about money and the future and everything else. That must have been awful, Marcus said. It was. But the worst part was watching Tommy reach for his dad and having David just not respond. Like Tommy was just an inconvenience. When David finally left for good, Tommy was too little to really understand what had happened. But as he's gotten older, he started asking questions. That's why today at daycare was so hard for him. Exactly. And that's why I'm so scared, Marcus. Tommy has already been abandoned by one man who was supposed to love him. If you decide this isn't what you want— Sarah, Marcus interrupted gently. Look at me. She met his eyes. I am not going anywhere. I don't know how to make you believe that except to prove it over time, but I'm telling you right now, I am not David. I'm not going to get scared and run. I'm not going to decide that loving you and Tommy is too much work. This isn't some phase I'm going through. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where he'd first met Sarah just 3 weeks ago. Do you know what I was doing the night before I met you? Sarah shook her head. I was sitting in my apartment, watching TV and eating dinner by myself, just like I had every night for years. And I remember thinking that if this was all my life was going to be, it would be fine. I didn't need more than that. He turned back to her. But I was wrong. I did need more. I needed you and Tommy. I just didn't know it yet. Marcus, Sarah said, standing up and walking over to him. Tommy asked if you could be his daddy. I heard him. What if I told you that I want the same thing? Not just for Tommy, but for me too? Marcus felt his heart start beating faster. What are you saying? I'm saying that I think I'm falling in love with you, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying that when I imagine our future, you're in it. I'm saying that Tommy isn't the only one who wants you to stay. Marcus reached out and cupped her face gently with his hands. Sarah Martinez, are you asking me to be part of your family? Yes, she said, tears flowing freely now. Yes, I am, if you want to be. Marcus kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I want to be, he whispered, more than I've ever wanted anything. From down the hall came the sound of small footsteps, and then Tommy appeared in the living room doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily. Are you guys okay? He asked. I heard crying. Sarah and Marcus looked at each other and then at Tommy, both of them smiling through their tears. We're better than okay, buddy, Marcus said, opening his arms. Tommy ran to them and Marcus scooped him up, pulling both Tommy and Sarah into a hug. Does this mean Mr. Marcus is going to be my daddy now? Tommy asked. Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded with a huge smile. Yeah, buddy, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. If you want me to be. I do want you to be, Tommy said seriously. But can I still call you Mr. Marcus? Because that's your special name. You can call me whatever you want, Marcus said, as long as you know that I love you and I'm not going anywhere. I love you too, Daddy Marcus, Tommy said, and then yawned hugely. As they tucked Tommy back into bed, the little boy grabbed Marcus's hand. Daddy Marcus, Tommy said sleepily. Yes, buddy? Tomorrow, can you teach me how to fix cars like you do? Marcus smiled and squeezed Tommy's hand. Tomorrow, I'll teach you whatever you want to learn. And as Marcus and Sarah stood in the doorway watching Tommy fall asleep, both of them knew that their lives had just changed forever. What had started as a chance meeting in a parking lot had become something neither of them had expected. A real family, built on love and trust, and the simple decision to show up for each other every single day. Marcus thought about his empty apartment across town, about all those lonely evenings and quiet weekends. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now. This was his life now. This woman and this little boy who had somehow made him understand what home really meant. Sarah thought about all those months of struggling alone, of lying awake at night worrying about money and child care and whether she was doing right by Tommy. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe, like she didn't have to carry everything by herself anymore. And Tommy, safe and warm in his bed, dreamed about blue pickup trucks and men who kept their promises and families that stayed together no matter what. 2 months had passed since that emotional evening when Tommy had asked Marcus to be his daddy, and the three of them had settled into a rhythm that felt like the most natural thing in the world. Marcus had officially moved in with Sarah and Tommy, bringing his few belongings from his old apartment and somehow making the small space feel bigger just by being there. Every morning, Marcus would wake up first and make coffee while Sarah got Tommy ready for daycare. They would all have breakfast together at the small kitchen table, with Tommy chattering about his plans for the day and Sarah reviewing her work schedule. Then Marcus would drop Tommy at daycare and Sarah at the diner before heading to his own job at the auto repair shop. Evenings were Marcus's favorite time. He would pick Tommy up from daycare, and the little boy would spend the entire drive home telling Marcus about everything that had happened during his day. What he had for snack, who he played with at recess, what story his teacher had read to the class. By the time they got home, Sarah would usually be finishing up at the diner, and the three of them would have dinner together and then spend the evening reading books, playing with Tommy's cars, or just talking while Tommy drew pictures at the coffee table. It was during one of these quiet evenings that Sarah made the proposal that would change everything. Tommy had fallen asleep on the couch between Marcus and Sarah while they were watching a movie. He was curled up with his head on Marcus's lap, and Marcus was absent-mindedly running his fingers through the little boy's hair. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly, so as not to wake Tommy. I need to ask you something important." Something in her tone made Marcus look at her more carefully. Sarah had that serious expression she got when she was thinking about something big. "What's on your mind?" Sarah reached over and gently moved Tommy's legs so she could face Marcus more directly. "I've been thinking about our situation, about what this all means, legally and officially." Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety. "What do you mean?" "Right now, you're wonderful with Tommy, and I can see how much you love him, and he obviously adores you. But legally, you're not his father. You don't have any official rights or responsibilities when it comes to him." Marcus wasn't sure where this was going. "Okay. If something happened to me," Sarah continued, "you wouldn't have any legal standing to keep Tommy with you. My parents live in California, and even though they barely know Tommy and have never shown much interest in being grandparents, they would probably get custody. Or worse, he could end up in the foster care system." The thought of Tommy being taken away from him made Marcus feel sick. In the past 2 months, the little boy had become as important to him as breathing. The idea of not being able to protect him or care for him was unbearable. "Sarah, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to make this official. I want you to legally adopt Tommy." Marcus stared at her. "You want me to adopt him?" "I want you to be his father in every way that matters, emotionally, legally, officially. I want him to have your last name if he wants it. I want you to be able to sign permission slips and make medical decisions and pick him up from school without anyone questioning whether you have the right to be there." Marcus looked down at Tommy's peaceful, sleeping face, then back at Sarah. That's a huge thing you're asking." "I know it is," Sarah said. "That's why I need to ask you properly." To Marcus's surprise, Sarah shifted off the couch and knelt on the floor in front of him, taking his free hand in both of hers. "Marcus Johnson," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes, "will you be my son's father? Will you adopt Tommy and give him the dad he's been hoping for his whole life? Will you take on all the responsibility and worry and joy and chaos that comes with being a parent?" Marcus felt like he couldn't breathe. He looked down at Tommy, still sleeping peacefully in his lap, completely trusting and safe. He thought about all the mornings they'd had breakfast together, all the bedtime stories he'd read, all the scraped knees he'd kissed better, all the times Tommy had run to him with excitement or tears, or just because he wanted a hug. "Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know it's a lot to ask," Sarah rushed on. "I know it means taking on financial responsibility and legal responsibility and emotional responsibility for another person's child. I know it means dealing with schools and doctors and homework and teenage years and college applications and all the things that come with raising a kid. I know it means putting Tommy's needs before your own wants for the next 14 years, minimum." "Sarah," Marcus tried again. "And I know it means tying yourself to us in a way that makes it impossible to just walk away if things get hard or if you change your mind about what you want your life to look like." "Sarah, stop." She looked up at him, her face full of hope and fear in equal measure. "Yes," Marcus said simply. "Yes? Yes, I will adopt Tommy. Yes, I want to be his father officially and legally and in every way that matters. Yes, I want to take on all the responsibility and worry and joy that comes with being his dad." Sarah started crying then, the kind of crying that comes from relief and happiness and overwhelming gratitude all at once. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Marcus gently moved Tommy so he could get down on the floor with Sarah. He cupped her face in his hands and looked directly into her eyes. "Sarah, 2 months ago I was a guy who went to work, came home to an empty apartment, and had no one in my life who really needed me. Now I have this amazing little boy who calls me Daddy Marcus and runs to me when he's hurt or scared or excited. I have this incredible woman who trusts me with the most important thing in her life. I have a family." He kissed her softly. "I want to make it official. I want Tommy to know that he's mine and I'm his, no matter what. I want him to never have to worry about whether I'm going to stay or whether I really love him or whether he can count on me. The adoption process, it's complicated," Sarah said. "There's paperwork and court dates and home visits and background checks. It could take months." "I don't care how long it takes," Marcus said. "I don't care how much paperwork there is. I want to do this." "Sarah, I want Tommy to be my son." They were both crying now, holding each other on the floor while Tommy continued to sleep peacefully on the couch above them. "There's something else," Sarah said. "What?" "I love you, Marcus. Not just because you're good to Tommy, although you are. Not just because you showed up when we needed help, although you did. I love you because you're kind and patient and funny and strong and because you make me feel like I'm not alone in the world anymore." Marcus kissed her again, longer this time. "I love you too. Both of you. More than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone." They were interrupted by a small voice from above them. "Are you guys okay down there?" Tommy asked sleepily, peering over the edge of the couch at his parents on the floor. Sarah and Marcus looked at each other and started laughing. "Come here, buddy," Marcus said, reaching up for Tommy. "We have something to tell you." Tommy climbed down and settled between them on the floor. "What is it?" "How would you feel if Daddy Marcus became your daddy for real?" Sarah asked. "Like, officially and legally and forever?" Tommy looked confused. "What do you mean?" Marcus tried to explain in terms a 4-year-old would understand. "You know how some of your friends at school have the same last name as their daddies?" Tommy nodded. "Well, if you wanted, you could have the same last name as me. And I would officially be your dad, not just someone who acts like your dad." "Would you still be Mr. Marcus?" "I'll always be your Mr. Marcus," Marcus promised. "But I would also be your real dad." Tommy thought about this for a moment with the serious concentration that children bring to important decisions. "Would that mean you could never leave?" he asked. Marcus felt his heart break a little at the question. Even at 4 years old, Tommy still carried the fear of abandonment from his biological father's departure. "It means I will never want to leave," Marcus said. "And it means that even if something happened where we couldn't all live together, I would still be your dad, and you would still be my son. Nothing could ever change that. And you would still help me with my cars, and read me stories, and make pancakes on Saturday mornings." "All of that and more," Marcus promised. Tommy looked at his mom. "Do you want Daddy Marcus to be my real dad?" "I want it more than anything," Sarah said. Tommy looked back at Marcus. "Then I want it too." The next few months were a whirlwind of paperwork, appointments, and legal proceedings. Marcus had to undergo background checks and home visits. He had to attend parenting classes and meet with social workers. There were forms to fill out, and fees to pay, and court dates to schedule. Through it all, Tommy was surprisingly patient with the process, even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. He just knew that all these appointments and meetings were somehow going to make Marcus his real dad, and that was enough for him. The hardest part was dealing with Tommy's biological father, David. As part of the adoption process, David had to either consent to having his parental rights terminated, or the court had to terminate them involuntarily. Sarah was terrified that David would suddenly decide he wanted to be part of Tommy's life again, just to cause problems. But when the lawyer contacted David, he signed the papers immediately. He didn't ask about Tommy, didn't want to see him, didn't even seem particularly interested in why someone else wanted to adopt his son. He just signed away his parental rights like it was a minor inconvenience. "I'm sorry, Tommy," Sarah said that night after she got the call from the lawyer. "I'm sorry your biological father couldn't be the man you deserved." "It's okay, Mommy," Tommy said, not looking up from the puzzle he was working on with Marcus. "I have a better dad now." Marcus had to excuse himself to the bathroom so Tommy wouldn't see him cry. The adoption was finalized on a Thursday morning in November. Marcus, Sarah, and Tommy all dressed up and went to the courthouse, where they sat in front of a judge who asked Marcus if he understood the responsibilities he was taking on and if he was sure this was what he wanted. "Your Honor," Marcus said, with Tommy sitting on his lap and Sarah holding his hand, "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." The judge smiled and signed the papers. And just like that, Tommy Martinez became Tommy Johnson. After the ceremony, they went out to lunch at Tommy's favorite restaurant, a small family diner not unlike the one where Sarah worked. Tommy was excited, but didn't quite understand the magnitude of what had just happened. To him, it was just another day with his family. But Marcus and Sarah understood. They understood that they had just made a commitment that went beyond love or emotion or even marriage. They had created a legal, permanent bond that said no matter what happened between the two adults, Marcus would always be Tommy's father. That evening, after Tommy was in bed, Marcus and Sarah sat on their couch, the same couch where Tommy had first asked Marcus to be his daddy, where Sarah had first told Marcus she was falling in love with him, where she had gotten on her knees and asked him to adopt her son. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked. Marcus looked around their small apartment, at the pictures on the refrigerator that now included him, at Tommy's adoption certificate sitting on the coffee table, at the woman beside him who had given him more than he'd ever dreamed possible. "Just one," he said. Sarah looked worried. "What?" "I regret that it took 32 years for me to find my family." Sarah smiled and curled up against his side. "Maybe you found us exactly when you were supposed to." Marcus thought about that day in the parking lot, about Sarah crying over her broken-down car, about the decision to help a stranger that had changed his entire life. He thought about all the small moments that had led to this big moment. The first time Tommy had called him Mr. Marcus, the first time Sarah had trusted him to pick Tommy up from daycare, the first time Tommy had fallen asleep in his arms. "Maybe," he agreed, "or maybe we were all just waiting for each other." 6 months later, Marcus and Sarah got married in the small backyard of Sarah's friend's house. Tommy served as the ring bearer and proudly told everyone who would listen that Marcus was his real dad now. During their vows, Sarah told Marcus that he had shown up at exactly the right moment to save them, but Marcus corrected her. "You both saved me," he said. "You gave me a purpose and a family and a reason to come home every day. You gave me a son who thinks I'm a superhero just for fixing cars and making pancakes. You gave me a life worth living." As they exchanged rings, Marcus looked out at their small gathering of friends and family. His boss, Joe, from the auto shop, Sarah's co-workers from the diner, a few of Tommy's friends from daycare with their parents, and Tommy himself, grinning hugely in his little suit. This was his family now. This was his life. And it had all started with a simple decision to help a stranger whose car had broken down. After the ceremony, as they were taking pictures, Tommy tugged on Marcus's jacket. "Daddy Marcus?" "Yes, buddy?" "Are you happy?" Marcus looked at Sarah in her simple white dress, glowing with happiness. He looked at Tommy, who was already getting grass stains on his suit from playing with the other kids. He looked at their friends and neighbors, all gathered to celebrate their little family. "I'm the happiest man in the world," Marcus said, and he meant every word. "Me too," Tommy said. "Except I'm not a man. I'm still a kid." "You're my kid," Marcus said, scooping Tommy up for a hug. "Forever and always?" "Forever and always," Marcus promised. And as the sun set on their wedding day, Marcus Johnson finally understood what home really meant. It wasn't a place or a building or even a set of circumstances. Home was the people who chose you and whom you chose back. Home was a little boy who called you Daddy Marcus and a woman who trusted you with the most precious thing in her life. Home was showing up every day and choosing love over fear, commitment over convenience, family over solitude. It had all started with a broken-down car and a stranger in need. But it had become something beautiful and permanent and real, a family built on love, choice, and the simple decision to stay.